see people.
Okay.
There we go. So welcome everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this, which means I don't have access to the chat pod when I do this. I am not as technologically.
We will read it out to you.
PowerPoint and Blue Jeans don't play nicely on my computer. So for that, I apologize. So I'm going to do this so that you can actually see my screen. And I'm hoping that you can actually see my screen. Maybe not. Let's make sure of that. Here we go. Okay. Very good. All right. Can you guys see that all right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, welcome to Supervision 101. This is a very aggressive agenda, and we may or may not actually get through all of this. To the best of my knowledge from who was in the participant list, it looks like I have a mix of supervisors and people who would be supervisees. So I'm going to try to tailor the session just a little bit to that. So I'm going to start out with just really quickly with some introductions. You don't need to come on camera to introduce yourself, but if you could just, in the introductions, we'll just talk about who you are and kind of what your intersectionality is with supervision. We'll talk a little bit about what clinical supervision is, the CACREP requirements, and why many campuses, and certainly the CMHC online campus requires that. Eventually we'll talk about some different supervision models, giving feedback, developing cultural responsiveness in supervision. Talk a little bit about assessment, although all of you here are very familiar with our DSKCA, and then really just talk a little bit about the supervisor as human and model in terms of supervision. So, again, kind of aggressive agenda, and if we don't get through all of it, hopefully we'll still walk away with a pertinent number of new skills. So who are we? Anyone in the session is likely to be involved in supervision in one way or another. If not now, then certainly in the future. So if you wouldn't mind just going ahead and introducing yourself and your current intersection with supervision, that would be perfect. I'll start then. For me, I'm Dr. Soli, and at the CMHC online campus, I'm the Director of Clinical Training. So I oversee all the clinical training for the program. It means I have everything to do with anything related to field work and also all the clinical training elements in all of the other classes, including the residency. So that is me. I've been a counselor for 24 years, and I have been a supervisor for 21 years. A counselor educator for 14.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dina Glazer. I'm the Senior Director of the Office of Placement and Training for Online. And so, much like Dr. Soli, I oversee training from an academic perspective, but I've also been a clinical supervisor and a director of a predoctoral internship program.
Hi, Dina. Welcome.
Thank you.
I will go next. This is Dr. LA. Of course, I'm the department chair of the CMHC Online, and I have been a clinical supervisor for a really, really long time now. I'm trying to do the math real quick. I don't even know. I don't even know. It's been a long time, almost 20 years, I think, and been a counselor for over 25, and I have private individuals that I supervise. I have a couple of clinical supervisees that I supervise, but I've done the whole spectrum: practicum, internship, doctoral practicum, doctoral internship, supervising supervisors. I've seen it from every angle possible, being supervised.
So thus, she could easily be giving this presentation, but we need CEs, so there we go. Others who are here, and I'm sorry I can't see your names or I would just call you out. I know Natasha's here.
Yeah, Natasha, why don't you go next?
Okay, so I'm Natasha. I am in my second year of the CMHC program. I will begin residency 2 in March, so after that, I'll be involved with being supervised. So I wanted to see what to expect.
Good, good. All right. Grace, what about you going next?
Thank you, Dr. LA.
I'm actually in my very first term here for CMHC and have heard a lot about supervision and just kind of wanted to know a little bit more about what it's about.
Okay, great. Thanks, Grace. Laura?
So I'm Laura, and I'm a licensed clinical counselor. I'm working currently in sports and health psychology. So, I've been on the supervisee end of the spectrum, and hopefully I'll be getting into the supervisor role soon.
Great. Welcome, Laura. And Nicola? It looks like Nicola is off mute, but I can't hear her.
Hello? Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, hi. I'm Nicola, and I'm in my second year of the DCMC program. I am looking forward to residency coming up pretty soon, and maybe a fall. And I just wanted to get more information on the supervisory program, I guess.
Okay, great. Nicola, thank you. Welcome. I think that's it, Dr. Soli. I think we got everybody
Okay.
except Colleen.
Beautiful.
Colleen,
Thank you.
talk about her connection if you wanted to too.
Colleen, you can
Hi.
bring your voice to us if you'd like.
Hi, I'm Colleen. I'm the department manager of the CMHC program. Welcome, everybody.
Colleen makes us all tick and keeps us all on track. So, well, thanks everybody for introducing yourself. And no matter what your role, there's always something to learn. So let me just talk a little bit about what clinical supervision is, which is what the focus of this particular session is going to be about. So clinical supervision is an intervention that is provided by a senior member of a profession, in ours, that would be counseling, to a junior member or members of that same profession. The relationship is, for starters, even though this doesn't say it, it is a relationship. And so important to ground everything from the fact that it is a relationship. It is also evaluative, it extends over time, and it has simultaneous purpose of enhancing the professional functioning of the junior member or members, monitoring the quality of professional services offered to clients, and serving as a gatekeeper for those who are entering a particular profession. So for our purposes, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between what clinical and administrative supervision is. Sometimes when people think about supervision, they think about, oh, well, the supervisor is just somebody who signs off on my paperwork and they make sure that I'm getting my hours. That is absolutely part of what a supervisor, especially if you would be in a program like ours, so like for Natasha and Nicola and the students who will be having supervision here in fieldwork, that's absolutely part of it, but not really all of it. And it's important to understand the difference. So as a clinical supervisors are responsible for the development of the supervisee as well as the quality and safety of the services delivered to the client by the supervisee. Much of the focus in this domain will be given to helping the supervisee develop clinical skills, individual case processing, and ongoing assessment. Administrative supervision really tends to place more emphasis on the issues related to the larger matters of organizational functioning, such as paperwork and documentation. So for those of you who are students, it's important to understand the difference between these lenses, because if your supervisor is not really giving you feedback on, say, clinical skills, on how you're doing, they're not really providing the kind of supervision that they're required to provide for our program. For those of you who have been supervisors in the past, and I know that there's some on here, do you have any further thoughts on, I guess, the importance of this differentiation and how you as supervisors might anticipate doing this?
I think that when possible, it's nice to have two different people serving in these roles. That's a rarity in our field, but I think that really helps distinguish the roles. So whenever possible, if you, in your future efforts, set up a distinction by having two different people serving in these different roles, it helps keep things clean and clear. It's not always feasible, but it does help.
Great suggestion, Dr. Ellie. Thank you. Okay, well, moving on, since this is a conference for the CMHC online campus, and we are the ones who are putting it on, I wanted to include the CACREP specific requirements for supervisors and supervision. And blowing this out past just our program, there are many, many campuses out there and many, many agencies, even if it is not a requirement to be CACREP, that really do want CACREP supervision guidelines. So, and that's the reason why, yeah.
I'm sorry, we have a couple of new students in here. We might want to clarify what CACREP is because they may not know.
Absolutely, and actually, let me go ahead and do that. So CACREP is an acronym, one of our many acronyms for the Council for the Council for the Accreditation of Counseling and Related Educational Programs, or CACREP. CACREP is the gold standard and by which counselor education programs can be accredited. It is CACREP accreditation is not a mandatory accreditation for supervision for counseling programs. It is something that a program has to volunteer to do, and there is an extremely rigorous process by which the program is evaluated to ascertain if they meet all of the CACREP standards and how they are doing that. The CMHC online campus went up for CACREP accreditation in the summer of 2017, and we were granted an 8-year CACREP accreditation, which is an excellent achievement at the board meeting in January of 2018. So we are an accredited program. Our program is accredited to the 2016 CACREP standards, which are the most recent CACREP standards. So the program that you're in or that you're affiliated with here really is on the leading edge of implementing those standards. There are still a lot of programs out there that are operating under the standards that are actually now almost 10 years old. So that's what CACREP is. Does anybody have any questions about that? Because I would like to just take that was a great interjection, Dr. LA. Getting CACREP is not a rubber stamp. So coming from a CACREP accredited university opens doors for you that coming from a non-accredited campus, honestly, it can be prohibitive. So in terms of what CACREP expects from its, and this is the two-way street, it expects this, there are expectations for CACREP for students and for supervisors. So site supervisors, site supervisor within the scope of our program means when you are in your fieldwork, which would be practicum, internship, and internship 2, and advanced internship if you need it. While you are at a fieldwork site out in the field, you will have a site supervisor. That person will be doing clinical supervision with you for a minimum of an hour a week, either in a one-on-one, meaning one supervisor to one student, or a triadic, which means one supervisor to 2 student type of session for a minimum of 1 hour weekly. Supervision, as it is defined by CACREP, includes regular feedback to the student on skill development and is not strictly administrative, and it cannot be done in a group setting. So if there are more than one, if there's more than 2 students to one supervisor, it does not count as the individual requirement under the CACREP guidelines. It's also important to recognize that why an hour does not equal to 30-minute sessions in terms of getting this requirement at fieldwork. Oftentimes, sites are very busy, and we understand that, and we expect that you're going to probably be getting a lot of supervision. We call it kind of like on the fly, walking between sessions, pop into the office after a session and get supervision. However, it really is important to have a dedicated hour where you can have your supervisor's undivided attention, where they can give you, where you can really process and really develop not only your clinical skills, but you're also developing the relationship with your supervisor. In our program, a lot of the students stay at their site for an entire year, and so they develop a really important supervisory relationship, and that takes time. And it needs attention, and so having an hour where it's an undivided attention for you to have their time to be able to give feedback, to really dig in, unpack cases, and really look at things in a really set kind of way. Site supervisors also engage in regularly scheduled and ongoing recording review. So they are looking at your work, whether that is through looking at your recordings, whether that is doing live supervision when they are in a session with you, if they might do co-counseling with you. Some places have, they have like a two-way mirror where you can be in, the clinical room where you're doing the counseling and the supervisor is outside of the room looking. There are lots of different setups, but the site supervisor must actually get their eyes on your work in a substantive way, and then they will also be giving formative and qualitative feedback assessments on your work on a regular basis back to the university. The site supervisor and the student regularly review fieldwork hours. Site supervisors actively engage in ongoing biweekly consultation with the student's assigned university supervisor. Let me just take a second for those of you who are students. Our definition of a university supervisor is the university supervisor you will have for each of your internship courses is the person who is teaching the course. So, for example, right now, Dr. Crowley is teaching internship 2. She is not only the instructor for that class, she's also the university supervisor for that class. In ours, our university supervisors also conduct an hour and a half a week of required group supervision. And that takes place in a Blue Jeans room or in another video context if that changes. And you as students are required to attend group supervision for CACREP as well for a minimum of an hour and a half each week. And supervisors can help all stakeholders with those requirements. So, supervisees. So it's important that as supervisees, you are aware of what the CACREP requirements are. You are aware of what the program's requirements are. It's also important as supervisees that you're aware of what your own state licensure requirements are and are making sure that you're getting those as you go along. Any questions on this before I move on? Okay, so I'm a big fan of talking about supervision in terms of parallel processes. So we have some sage clinical supervisors here in the meeting. So what do students, if you have, or my supervisors here, what is parallel process in supervision? What are your thoughts on that?
I've already answered one, so I'm feeling like it should fall to Dina and Laura and them to answer some of the others. So, but I can answer if nobody else wants to.
Well, this is Dina. I would say I see parallel process happen all the time with our interns and supervisees, just in general, in terms of what's happening a lot of the times with you and your relationship with your supervisor might be replicating what's happening with you and your client. Yeah, I could go into an example, but one is not coming right now.
That's okay. That's okay. And that was a great explanation. So, so the question kind of arises, as well as what's going on, like in the relationship with your site supervisor and how that might parallel what is going on with one's clients. It's helpful to look at too whether or not important counselor characteristics parallel supervisor characteristics. And I know that the students on the line could probably talk about what some of the important counselor characteristics are. So, but I'll just go ahead and go through these. So, important counselor characteristics: empathy and unconditional positive regard for their client. Why would this be important for a supervisor to parallel that process if we just change the word for supervisee? One of my students want to chime in on that?
I can chime in. This is Natasha.
Yeah.
So I think it would be important because as a developing counselor, as a student, I'm probably going to be extremely nervous for a while. So having, like going into a supervision session, having that empathy and unconditional positive regard would give me the confidence to go into maybe another session with a client or not completely just break me down
Mm-hmm.
if I did
Mm-hmm.
something not completely right, not wrong, but maybe not completely right. So I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely, Natasha, I really appreciate that input. And I think that that really speaks to the next bullet point here too, which is really approaching clients, which is a counselor characteristic with non-judgmental and accepting approach. But the same, that parallels how good supervisors approach their supervisees as well. If a supervisee tends to be, super judgmental and super critical, probably the supervisee is not going to flourish within that supervision relationship, and much like a client won't either. And also, like, really being cognizant of the fact that no matter how expert the counselor is, he or she must acknowledge that the client is the true expert on their own life. And I think that, again, here this parallels the supervisor. Well, yes, they are in the role of providing feedback, and supervisees have the ethical responsibility to listen and take in that clinical feedback. Also doing so in a way recognizing that every single counselor, whether it's a supervisor who is a counselor or a counselor who is in supervision, we all have different styles. We all have different ways of being. We all have different lived experiences. We all come from different cultures. Thus, our counseling is going to be different. And as everyone here knows or is already learning, there is no one way to do counseling. Are there certain ethical guidelines that have to be followed? Of course. Are there better practices? Probably so. Are there evidence-based practices that we might want to utilize? Of course. But at the bottom of the day, there's no one who can say, well, this is absolutely the way it has to be done in terms of working with a client in a particular way. And conveying to the client that they really have an ally towards whatever it is that they're working towards. I love this quote by Maya Angelou. She's one of my absolute favorites. I've learned that people will forget what you say. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I put in some little things here because, when supervisees come to their supervisors, especially as Natasha noted in the early part of supervision, they're going to ask for help. They're going to feel naked, like very exposed, really vulnerable. The whole supervision process may feel like a mystery. They may feel broken. They may come in and say, I just messed up with this client so bad, I shouldn't be a counselor. All of those things can potentially happen within that relationship. And perception really is everything. And I say these things from the focus of a supervisee, but for those who are in training to be supervisors, it's really important to remember in each and every counseling session, supervision session, that you enter, that your supervisee is still vulnerable. Even if it is a supervisee, I know supervisors have PhDs and have been counseling for years and years and years and years and years, who are themselves clinical supervisors. That does not necessarily mean that she's going to approach them with an attitude that does not encourage them to be vulnerable and not highlight the fact that that they may feel broken that particular day, or that their perception of what they did is a little bit skewed. So as supervisors, we carry a really definite burden in really making sure that we, as we enter every supervision session, are really approaching people as our supervisees, as people in whatever space it is that they are in. I'm actually not going to play this YouTube video for you, but I would encourage you to look at it as if you want to actually get to use the videos later. Yeah, go ahead.
So I would also say, and I don't know, I don't think you mentioned it, but the parallel process can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. And so if your supervisor is role modeling bad behaviors, like showing up late, not being mindful and being aware and being present with you,
as a supervisee, they're not turning their paperwork in on time, then you are likely to start to model those behaviors if you don't put a stop to it. And so those are things that I want to really empower the students who are on the call, that if your supervisor isn't doing their expectations, that you have support. And Dr. Soli, myself, Dr. Rush Wilson, and also Dina, who's on the call, to support you and to back you up and make sure you get the supervision you deserve so that you don't become what they are doing to you.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons that like reading through like the field work manual is so important before you start supervision, to really understand what the supervisors are supposed to do. And they also have the manuals. I have conversations with them, so they know what they need to do, and whether or not they are doing it is a whole different thing. And you do have a responsibility as a student to reach out to your university supervisor, to me, you know, and also to bring it forward to your site supervisor with the understanding that there's always a power differential there, and that can feel kind of tricky. So, but as Dr. L.A. said, you are never alone out there when you are in supervision within the scope of the university. And truly, you are never alone out there as practitioners either. And I think that that is something that is really important for you to take away. You'll never be as supported probably as you are in your graduate program, or if you go into another higher ed degree. However, we remain. I still do supervision with students who were some of the first students that I supervised for consultation. You know, we talk. That's part of the beauty of our profession, is we develop relationships, and those don't necessarily go away. So let's talk a little bit about what some of the helpful traits are. As Dr. L.A. said, there may be some things that aren't helpful. Well, hopefully you're encountering more supervisors who have helpful traits. So the flip side of these would be things that you would want to be talking to somebody else about. So some of the helpful traits for supervision is that they actually initiate supervision. While as interns, yes, you need to get it. It is important that supervisors take the responsibility, and they are the senior members, and they do need to set routines and set times and make sure that they are following through with those schedules. There need to be clear parameters. As a supervisor, setting clear parameters for what the expectations are within a supervision session. So I want, you know, as a supervisor, I may say, I need you to send me that recording 24 hours before we meet so I can take a look at it so that we can talk about what I saw. I need you to bring your case notes from last week so that we can take a look at those and see how those match up with your tape, right? Establishing a supervisory alliance, much like a working alliance, a therapeutic alliance. A supervisory alliance goes back to that, you know, kind of what Natasha had said, like making sure that the supervisor and supervisee have open communication. Intentional and collaborative goal setting. This is actually one of the things within the scope of our program that is a required assignment. There is an assignment where you do set each term intentional and collaborative goals with your site supervisor for the term, and you both sign off on them. That may not be true out in the field where you're getting supervision maybe after graduation, but as supervisors, when you all turn into supervisors, or for those of you who already are, making sure that you are doing goal setting with your supervisee clients can be helpful too. Of course, giving feedback, supervision, composition, and interventions. And this is one where I think that actually it's really helpful to have conversations around what do your supervisees really want to get out of supervision? Are there particular interventions that they would like to maybe have modeled? What is it that they're looking for? And then I guess just the supervisor in relationship, really helping, really remembering that like any relationship, there are glitches, there are bumps, there are rough patches, and just like any relationship, being calm, continuing to pave the way for open communication while also giving clear feedback, because as supervisors, and I mentioned the term gatekeepers before, as supervisors, especially for supervisors who are supervising students in graduate programs, there's a definite and distinct gatekeeping function that happens. And that pretty much means that it's our ethical responsibility as supervisors of graduate students to ensure that our students are really ready ethically, professionally, clinically, disposition, skills, and knowledge to sign off on them to be counselors. And that's really the bottom line of what we do as supervisors here is that. So as a supervisee, and certainly actually all of these, what could be said for supervisors as well, considering diversity, really as a supervisee, it's important for you to be aware clearly of your client's diversity. It's also helpful to look at this through the lens of your supervisor. You and your supervisor may have different, you may have different cultural makeup. And while certainly it would be best case scenario if your supervisor brought that to the relationship and put it on the table, as a supervisee, you have every right to do that as well. It's your right to advocate for yourself, for what your needs are. It's your right to discuss ethics with your supervisor. It's actually your ethical responsibility if you do see your supervisor or anyone at your fieldwork site doing things that are unethical or what you believe to be unethical, for you to follow your ethical decision-making model and for you to consult with a trusted colleague, either at the site. We are always available to consult with. Your university supervisor would be a good person, but you don't just want to let it slide and say, oh, well, they're the experts, they're the real counselors. Say no. Okay, it's important for you to check those things out and have every right and responsibility to do that. Engaging in self-reflection and professional development related to supervision regularly. Supervision is hard. It's hard. It's hard as a supervisor. I find supervision very enlivening, but I'm also tired when I'm done with it. I like to sit back at the end of it and reflect and go, okay, so what went well? What didn't go well? Like what about me was like maybe impacting this in a positive way, or what about me maybe was getting in the way of some of the things that might have been happening in supervision. For supervisees, that's also really important, and to keep a journal of that. I cannot stress enough for both supervisors and supervisees, like keeping a personal journal of what's happening, and of course for supervisors, making sure that is kept in a place where others don't have access to it, make sure we're FERPA and HIPAA compliant and all of that is important. But it just helps to be able to go back and go, wow, look at my growth. Or this seems to be a recurring problem with the supervisee. How can I start to budge this obstacle? And again, the supervisor engages in consultation with other supervisors and supervision regularly. So as supervisors, we also don't operate in a silo. We should be connecting and getting supervision of our supervision on a regular basis. I've been talking a bit here. I'm going to take just a pause and see if anybody has any thoughts or questions on what we've covered so far. And then we can just move sort of into having a bit of a conversation about this. And for those of you on the call who haven't actually had clinical supervision yet, I would love to hear from any of you who have had clinical supervision and thinking back on that, like what went well, what made it a really good relationship, what did the supervisor do, what didn't go well, what were things that you may have experienced that if you could go back and have them do it over, or that you learned really not to do. Anyone?
Well, I can say that my supervisor, he was just perpetually late all the time, which was something that I learned I shouldn't do. But then I think I forgave him for doing that because he was really big on just like identity and building your own identity as a counselor and how to use your own identity to help your clients. And that's kind of how all supervision was how are you going to use yourself as a tool to help your client. He didn't necessarily try and change my approach or anything like that. It was just adapting it and how would you adapt it in different situations.
Mm-hmm. And so for you, that you felt like that was helpful?
It definitely helped me as a clinician because it made me learn how to adapt to certain clients really quickly, like even in the moment with certain techniques. So it definitely helped my
Mhm.
clients' progression.
Okay, thank you. Any experiences of what did not go well? Oh, I can share one of what I went. One of my supervisors in grad school. All they could say to me was, "You did a good job. That was great." That was literally like I got no feedback on what I was not doing well. Then I changed classes, and I was with someone who I felt like I had literally like I felt like an abject failure. Like I'm probably going to get kicked out of the program because this person just like they could not find anything that I was doing that was right, and I felt so defeated after having a whole term of someone telling me, "Oh, you just great job, great job, great job," without getting any like targeted feedback. And I was still, I was pretty new, and honestly, like we didn't have a lot. This a long time ago, so they didn't really teach us how to be supervisees. Like saying, well, I need more than that. Like I didn't recognize that like I really needed to do that. And so that second term of supervision, I was just beside myself. It ended up being an amazing experience because I learned so much more, but it really taught me as a supervisor and a supervisee, like ask for what you need as a supervisee. And as a supervisor, don't be afraid to actually give pointed, targeted feedback that is, and we can call it critical feedback, but it's constructive feedback. Just telling somebody good job does not help them. And for those who are on the call who might be entry-level supervisors, it's difficult to step and lean into that feeling because we don't want to hurt the relationship that we're forming with a supervisee. And still, the most important thing that we can do is help them grow as clinicians. And from the supervisee lens, really looking at that from, I'm getting this feedback because my supervisor wants me to be the very best counselor that I can possibly be.
And
So
Lori,
regularly, yeah.
No, I was going to say, I think that was one of the strengths of one of my supervisors who even 15 years later, I still have contact with. I worked with her on learning how to be a traumatologist in recovery and stabilization. So she taught me all of that. And so I was already an established counselor, but I went to her to learn this specialized set of skills and working with trafficked clients and things like that. And she said, I believe in you enough to give you real feedback. And she would constantly remind me. She spent a lot of time in our first session saying, look, I know you're an established counselor. I know you know the basics. She goes, but my job is to make sure you don't harm those clients. And she goes, and so I'm going to tell you the things that probably nobody else is willing to tell you. And that shows you that I care about you. And it was really nice because she established that in the beginning and then she continued. It wasn't like that only happened once. She would constantly reinforce, remember, the reason I give you this hard feedback is so that you can be better because I believe you can be better. And that really inspired me and empowered me.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for that example, Dr. LA. And I think that speaks to, kind of these little good ideas, bullets down here just a little bit too, is really facilitating those discussions early on about what they want and need from supervision and really establishing like the parameters around like why I'm doing what I'm doing and establishing that open communication so that the supervisor feels free to be like, why are you telling me this? And also just like you said, like really reinforcing for supervisors, like I do believe in you. And that is why I can give you targeted feedback. If you are not getting any feedback, that's a cause for concern, truly. Not that you're doing anything right or wrong, but that's a conversation to have for sure. So supervisor as human and role model, this kind of goes back to that parallel process piece, but I think that one of the most potent things, and this is especially true for students who are in programs and out at site, as supervisors, whether it is a site supervisor, university supervisor, supervisor of supervisors, supervisors of people who are working towards licensure. We are the role models for them. And what we say and what we do are equally as important. Watch, they listen, just like clients. Clients don't just listen to our words as clinicians. They also, they pick up much more subtlety about how we do operate than necessarily we may even give them credit for. So in the role of supervisor as human being and role model, there are a few things that I just wanted to highlight that within my own experience of being a supervisor and a supervisee, I find to be particularly important. One is self-care. I know that this is a topic that sometimes gets beaten to death, but it also is one that gets probably the least incorporated in our world. Self-care cannot be underpinned enough. If a supervisor has a session and they are sick and sneezing and ill, it's not modeling good self-care. If the supervisee sees them working from 8 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, 6 days a week, that is not role modeling healthy boundaries, healthy self-care. We as supervisors constantly need to be appraising ourselves for what we are doing that we are passing on either purposely or not purposely to our supervisees. Being brave. And I think that actually this kind of harkens back to what Dr. L.A., that example that she just gave us in terms of that supervisor was brave enough to give targeted hard feedback. It can be much easier to just step back and go, she'll be okay. She's good enough. Being brave means leaning into our discomfort and doing it anyway for the good of not only our supervisee, but more importantly for their clients. That supervisor knew that ultimately her main responsibility was the clients that Dr. L.A. was serving. She knew that and took that on enough to be brave enough to really give that kind of important feedback. So as supervisees, you can see, as you become the receptacles for this bravery, understand that it takes strength to be able to give that. And at some point,
like I always say,
hello?
Anybody who takes MCA knows.
Somebody is off mute.
But there's
a lot of
them.
Dana.
Yes, and I want.
Dana. Okay, there you go.
Okay, thanks. Empathy, I've already talked about this a little bit. Asking for help. Sometimes supervisors don't know the answer. I am not a fake it until you make it kind of person when it comes to if a supervisee asks me something that I legitimately do not know the answer to, I'm not going to try to fake it. I'm going to say, you know what, I don't know. We can either figure it out together or I will get back to you. But especially when it comes to, supervising for counselors, we are in the human service field. And at the end of the day, our making sure that the clients are okay is our primary directive. So we need to make sure that we ask for help when we need to. Modeling cultural responsiveness. We talk, we could go into this. This is an entire day of supervision right here. Developing ourselves as culturally responsive supervisors and clinicians. I can't underscore, circle, put that around there or not. It is something that we have to do on an ongoing basis, doing things like, I don't know how many of you were in any of the sessions yesterday. There were some fantastic sessions yesterday that really highlighted some amazingly important cultural responsive skills that supervisors could incorporate. Keep doing your professional development and don't silo yourself just because you happen to be a traumatologist. That doesn't mean that that's all, don't stay just in that. Look towards, because cultural responsiveness in traumatology, while that may be your specialization, you may also encounter other types of clients, and there may be culturally specific, traits that you need to think about for the different kinds of clients that you interact with. So just thinking about that, maintaining that, and giving it time. I read this really interesting thing in one of I call them my go-to books this morning. It was talking about stillness and about being mindful. And it said, there's this misconception that in order to be mindful, we have to meditate or whatnot. But the way that this person approached it was, it's really just creating this opening where we can just sit and think about, just think, like think and be, like think creatively, not think to problem solve, but just like let things wash. And I thought about this in terms of like cultural responsiveness, because I know for myself, when I can give myself space to just be instead of do, there's all sorts of answers that emerge for me, but to questions I didn't even know that I was asking. So I think that this actually kind of tags back to self-care, but like giving yourself space to be reflective in terms of your cultural responsiveness, I think is a key element. Maintaining relationships and repairing alliance rupture. Does anybody have any thoughts on any of this before we move forward? I know we're actually coming close to time. I want to talk a little bit about just some supervision models. I realize that I've got supervisors on the line here, so you probably already know what these are, but there's definitely integrated supervision, I believe, is one of the ways that probably most supervisors are operating. I know it's certainly when I was trained, I was trained in all the models. But for you out there who will be experiencing this, it's in all likelihood your supervisor will be using integrated supervision practices, which it takes into account the supervisor's level of training, your experience and your proficiency, but it's also taking a look at your developmental needs as an essential ingredient for your model of supervision for how they're supervising you. So there's always a beginning point, but an end point, but no end point, sorry, for learning clinical skills. Like, it's not like we ever stop developing as clinicians until we kind of hang up the sign or we take it down and say, okay, I'm done. Even then, we probably really don't. Be careful of counselors and supervisors who think they know it all. Somebody who says, well, I am the expert on cognitive behavioral traumatology supervision. Well, okay. Just be careful, be wary of that. Account for individual learning styles and personalities of supervisees, and fit your supervisory approach with the developmental stage of each counselor. And there is a logical sequence to development, even though it is not always predictable. And by development, I mean counseling development, counseling proficiency development in supervisees. Some counselors may have been in the field for years, but remain at a really early stage of professional development, whereas others really need to progress more quickly. I'm going to move ahead here a little bit, and I'm going to move ahead again. So how to give feedback, and I'm actually going to say how to give feedback and also how to take feedback. It's important that we actually look at work for supervisees, make sure that you are asking for that. Asking the student or the supervisee for their strengths and challenges. What do they think is going well? What do they want feedback on? Asking for what they want feedback on in advance if possible. Giving clear, constructive feedback on skills and disposition. Role playing with them, which if we had a little bit more time, I would do here, and offering resources. Does anybody on the call have any more thoughts on giving feedback? Assessment. I am not going to go into a lot of assessment here just because for supervision, for those of you who are within our program, you already all know that we use the DSKCA, which is the Dispositions, Skills, and Knowledge Competency Assessment. It is our overall program assessment tool for noting how students are progressing from the start of the program to the end of their program in a variety of different areas. It is a developmental tool, so the idea of the instrument being rating from a 1 to a 4 means that in the first year you're looking at 1 to 1.5, in the second year 2 to 2.5, and by the end of the program we expect you to be averaging a 3.5. The expectation, nor should you be getting perfect scores of 4 in the first term of your program. It is supposed to be developmentally leveled. As a program, we're still working on some training on the faculty end of that. And remembering, and I'm just going to end it here and then open it up to questions and thoughts, that site and university supervision, as well as clinical supervision in the field, supervision of supervisors, all about teamwork. You know, working together with each other is one of the most important things that we can do as supervisors. So I'm going to stop it there because I know we're probably going to have other people coming in, and just open it up to discussion. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so I can see your lovely faces. Thoughts, ideas, other things that have come to you. What is something, I guess, that each of you might be taking away from our time together today? Anybody besides Dr. LA who I can see has something to say? Dina, how about you? Natasha, oh, thank you. You're awesome.
So I took lots of notes, but what I'm taking away from this is just kind of planning for my supervision in the next coming months of what to expect from my supervisor, how to I guess stand up for myself, advocate for myself when I feel that I'm not getting the feedback that I would like, and then kind of steps to take, either going to my supervisor or going to the university supervisor. It was very helpful to know the differences because I never heard, you know, all the different supervision, like the administrative, the clinical, the university. So it was very helpful to know the differences of each of them.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
You're welcome.
This is Dina. I really like how you pointed out. I always tell my students at the beginning, in the words of Oprah, feedback is your friend. And I think that that is something that we try and instill with our interns early on, and just remind them that, you know, there is this sort of concrete aspect of supervision, signing hour logs, evaluating, and things like that I like to explain in detail at the beginning of our relationship, just to let them know what that part of the relationship will look like, but then also sort of infuse that it's an ongoing dialogue of feedback. It doesn't just happen at evaluation time. And so, you know, remembering as students that you need to be engaging in those conversations, which can be really difficult as supervisors and as supervisees, to have that sort of transparent dialogue about, you know, this is what you're doing really well, but here are some areas of growth, and being very, you know, receptive to it can be hard at first. And it can be hard on the supervisor's end to be as direct as you need to be as a supervisor. So I appreciated your discussion of that.
Thank you. Dr. LA, I think you're trying to talk and you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That was weird. Anyway, I was saying that based on what you said earlier about, you know, this is as supported as students will be when they're in their program, and that's such a true statement, that just try to take advantage of it. Be little sponges. Try to soak up everything you can. And if you're not getting what you need or want, speak up. You just have to, because you're only going to get your master's once. Well, maybe more. Some people go back and get a second, but you're only going to get your CMHC master's once. So, I mean, really take advantage of it and soak up everything you can from your university supervisor, from Dr. Soli, from your site supervisor, and don't let yourself be shortchanged.
Great addition. Thank you. Laura? Nicola?
Yeah, I think for me it was definitely helpful in just learning the different styles and kind of comparing it to my experience, and not even just, you know, the supervisor I had, but looking at the various kind of people in managerial positions that I've interacted with, and just looking at their styles and why certain teams were very, very successful and why certain teams kind of crashed and burned, and tying that all together as well.
Absolutely. Yes, this is while we're talking about counselor supervision, certainly much of this is broadly applicable to supervision of humans, whatever role that happens to be in. Thank you. I really appreciate that perspective, Laura, very much. Anyone else? Takeaways, final thoughts? Well, I just want to say thank you so much for those of you who chose to come to this session today. Dina, it was delightful to have you here, as well as you, Laura, and the students. And of course, I always appreciate it when Dr. LA is around and can support me and offer her deep wisdom, especially on this subject in which her knowledge is deep and vast as well. So, but I appreciate all of your time today. I hope that you're taking away at least a nugget or two, and I thank you very much. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your conference. And I
was just going to say the next session is in Dr. Hudson's classroom. So if anybody is going to that, they'll need to leave this one and click on the link in the schedule to join that next session, which is all in Dr. Hudson's. We only have one session running next time. Okay.
And anybody who wants to come to my next session, which is at 4 o'clock Eastern time this afternoon.
I had one at 2 Eastern and one at 5 Eastern. So.
Okay, so, well, you all have the schedule. So thank you again. I appreciate your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks. Bye. Good job, Lori.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.